Lord, and open this with prayer. Father, we are so happy to be in your house tonight. Our souls are filled because we've come to your house and we feel the Spirit moving already, Father, in this place. And we ask you now to come and just fill us with your Spirit and accept the worship that we bring to you tonight through the study of your word. We ask a blessing on Matthew as he brings the words to us tonight. And we ask that you just guide him and keep him in your word. And Father, now we want to thank you so much for each and every one that's come out tonight to study your word. And when it's all said and done today, we'll be just very careful to give you all the honor and all the glory for the mighty God that you really are. In that holy name of Jesus, I pray it. Amen. Now, Brother Matthew, Dr. Matthew, come on up and
thank you, Billy. Yes, I just do want to confirm that to y'all that I am a doctor, and I have been now for about 3 minutes. So, I don't know. I've never been a doctor before. I don't know that I want to go through that much school, though. I have a lot of respect for people who do. For most of y'all all know I'm going to have trouble with this. You can. The mic can't hear me. I'll be fine. I'm gonna do good. I'm just gonna have to learn to plant. As y'all do know that I am Paula Belcher's kid brother. I was, and just to set the record straight, she and my other older sister both wanted a baby brother. So she wanted this, and whatever she tells you, all the stories she might have, I'm here to tell you they're 100% true. Okay, so keep that in mind as you listen to her stories. I want to start off telling a little background on myself. I think most of y'all know me as Paula's brother, and y'all know that I'm in the Navy and that I work down at NAS in Pensacola. But a lot of you don't know much more than that. And I did grow up, most of my memorable life anyway, I was in Texas. And I grew up in a Church of Christ. And I say that with pride. I really enjoyed my time growing up. And I enjoyed my time in the church, honestly. I was very good at being a kid. And I really enjoyed a lot of the things that we did as a church. We had a very active youth group, and I was constantly involved with that, did a lot of mission trips, and that's where I learned, that's where I based my faith out of, was through those interactions with my hometown church. That being said, tonight is the first time I'm getting up in front of a group since I was about 17 years old. I might have been 16. I was supposed to give a little Wednesday night Bible study. It's supposed to last about 15 minutes, and because I was 17 and I knew more than anybody else in the world, I decided I was going to wing it. That did not go well. I'm just here to put that out. You would be surprised probably how hard it is to come up with 15 minutes worth of stuff when you've prepared for nothing. So tonight, I came prepared. Billy told me last week he told me it was good to see some young blood up in the front, and I'm here to say it looks like I am probably on the younger side here, and so I'm happy to be up here and give you maybe a little different perspective and take. I can already tell you, Billy, I do not have charts and graphs and maps. I do not have handouts, and I do not have quite the history lesson. That's what I really enjoy about Billy's services every night. Not only do we talk about what's going on, but you kind of give what else is going on around in that time, and I really enjoy that. It's actually what brought me in. That was, Paula brought me here on a Wednesday night, and I kept coming for about a couple of months, just only on Wednesdays. So I am happy to be here today. So today, with no more ado, let's go ahead and get started with this. I decided to pick, I had to pick a topic, and I decided on something that I felt that I knew enough about, but probably not a whole lot about. And so I decided I was going to research, and I was going to figure out, and I was going to learn myself, and then I was going to impart my knowledge to y'all. And that it is what basically has happened here. I chose faith and hope as my topic this evening. And Billy, I tell you, if you need another one, I can. This is a two-parter. I can end it real well here, but I can give you a second part. Today, my verse is Hebrews verse 11, or Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. We're going to do a whole lesson on verse 1. Faith and hope here. We talk about, Paul wrote in Galatians, if you look it up, 3:11, he says, "It is evident that no one is justified before God by the law, for the righteous shall live by faith." What? Which one? I just quoted Galatians 3:11, but tonight we will be in Hebrews 11, verse 1. So, the author of Hebrews in this verse here, first of all, anybody know who wrote Hebrews? Nobody knows. That's right. In my learning tonight, I kind of seems like the Bible nerds, the ones who get paid for this for a living, they seem to seems like they kind of assume it was Paul. This doesn't sound like Paul, a lot of it, but at the same time, I guess they're kind of like, well, who else could it be? Well, who knows? Well, nobody knows, so that's what I'm going with tonight. So our author of Hebrews here has 2 points about faith in this chapter. And the first is, of course, verse 1. He spent an enormous amount of time on verse 1. It fits in one line here on my screen. And verse 1 reads, "Faith shows the reality of what we hope for. It is the evidence of things we cannot see." He spent a lot of thought. I imagine a lot of thought went into that, because the other 39 verses is the second point to that, and it was just descriptions of that faith, or evidence of that faith, in people. And of course, he quotes all the heroes, Moses. He quotes Noah, or he brings up the stories of Moses and Noah, and all the people that we know and love. That would be the second part that I could do, is we could go through verse 2 through 40. But we'll see how this one goes tonight. So in one verse, he gives us a description of faith, and in the next 39, he gives us examples of that faith. And I want to focus on that description. So from the time that we were little, I told you all, I almost grew up in a church. That between scouts and sports and church, that's kind of where I hung out. And so from the time that we were little, and we're learning about God and Jesus, and we learn about those heroes I talked about. We talked about, one of the first stories you learn about is, in fact, Adam and Eve, and very quickly it's Noah. There's a lot of stuff in between there, but, that's kind of the way you do it for a child. And so we're very early on, we're taught about love and taught about, caring and God and everything. And then they bring up this word, faith. And that's kind of where I'm coming from tonight. Faith. That's a word we say a lot. We have faith in things, but what do we attribute that to? And how do you explain faith to a child? And I came up with I wouldn't even attempt to try that. So this concept of faith, and anybody that knows me, have met me, they know I'm kind of an intellectual. I'm kind of a problem solver. I like to think about the problems, think about what I'm doing, and do it. So as an intellectual, I wanted to understand what faith is. And it's funny, because as an intellectual, I said, I want to see faith. Like, yeah, right. And so I'm going to start off here with I'm going to continue on. I guess I've already started, haven't I? So you've gotten many definitions of faith. For anybody that's been on this earth 15 years, they probably have their own definition of what faith is. And I started coming up with, a lot of people assume they know what faith is, but I've kind of been thinking faith is probably not what you thought it was. I'm not accusing anybody in here. I'm just in general. Too often I notice that when people talk about faith, they bring up things that it's not real, not what biblical faith is, not what we believe here. So I have a list of a couple of things here. And I think the glaring one is people think that faith is believing in spite of seeing. And though that is part of faith, that is kind of a tenet of faith, that's not what it is. That's not what we're talking about. You run into this, especially when you talk about non-believers. You talk about people that they're not church people. Let's say that, and they'll believe a 4,000-year-old Egyptian manuscript. Oh yeah, that's good. Or a 2,000-year-old Roman manuscript or something like that. And that, oh yes, that's good. But the Bible, why not? What's wrong with that? Why not the Bible? I mean, they'll quote Epictetus, the historian of the era, who confirms a lot of stuff that's talked about in the Bible. Oh, that's good, but not the Bible. So because they just believe that. People like that will believe that that we as Christians just believe in some mystical God, and though we don't see him, we still believe in it. And like I said, to an extent, I mean, that is somewhat true, but that's not what faith is. And it's also not like a intellectual nod of agreement either. You get some of these people that have you ever been talking to someone, or about a friend or a family member, or maybe a new, like a love interest or something, boyfriend, girlfriend, and inevitably somebody might, bring up, well, what do they have, are they a believer? Are they a Christian? They have any religious preferences? And they say something like this: well, they believe in God. Like, okay, that doesn't tell me anything. Because too often people think that is enough. People think that just a simple belief in God is enough to get them where they need to go. And I would argue that is not anywhere near what you need. If it was, they believe in God, and they do have a life with Jesus Christ, I was like, okay, we can start with that at least. But who else believes in God? I mean, I can think here. The devil believes in God. Yeah, that's very good. Yeah, the devil is probably something or God is probably something on the devil's mind on a regular basis. But that doesn't mean that, he has any chance of going, to heaven, any kind of life after earth here. No, he already doesn't have a life after earth. But so we have this idea that just believing in God is enough, and we have faith in that. And that's you're still missing the point. Some people think that it's like a positive feeling, that faith isn't a feeling. I don't understand that one. All these little examples here, with the exception of two, they were kind of Google searches of what I found, and it's not a blind optimism either. I had to think about this one for a minute, and I think it's kind of like, the blind. You have people that are very much, yes, that glass is half full. They're optimistic people. And then you have the pessimistic people that look at that glass and say, I'm gonna die of thirst. It's just not that bad. But they'll say things like I don't know what will happen, but they throw that but in there, and it always has to do, I have faith that it'll work out, or I have faith that things will go as planned. And kind of similar to that, they kind of think it's like it's wishful thinking, or it's like a you can almost say the word hope in that, and I know that's part of my lesson too. And it's this wishful thinking one that I think that too often people get mixed up on faith. People say things, well, I have faith that I'll hit the Powerball and be able to retire. Like, that's not how faith works either. and it's one of those things. It's way more nuanced than that, and I actually do talk about that here in a little bit. But so these are all the things I've decided that faith is not. So now that I've talked about what it isn't, now I'll probably talk about what it is, or at least my interpretation of it, as I have tried to learn today. So none of these examples are what true biblical faith is. Excuse me. It doesn't really define faith. And of course, I'm not sure that I could really define it. Or at least when I started this, I didn't think that I could give you a definition of faith itself. So I started with the author of Hebrews here. In Hebrews, I knew Hebrews 11. That was kind of the faith road there. You need to know about faith. Hebrews 11's it. That's the main point, and at least in the New Testament when they're talking about faith. And as I said, the author of Hebrews gives us a description of what faith is, and then spends another 39 verses in what faith, or examples of that faith. And so we've already talked about how many people think that faith is like an idea, or it's someone's feelings, and they feel a certain way, and that it's kind of true, I guess. But faith does not have an element of personal, or faith does have an element of personal conviction, but it's more than just a conviction. And I wrote down here a few different versions from a few different translations of the Bible. I start with NIV, which says, "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see." The NKJV, which is what I grew up on, it says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen." And for those of us that reading is not our first language, we have the easy-to-read version, which I kind of like the way it's written. It says, "Faith is what makes real things we hope for. It is proof of what we cannot see." So what's being said in Hebrews is that faith is a tangible evidence. It's something, that we can see, that we have of what we hope for. And I want to talk about what hope is in a little bit, because there's really three parts I've kind of discovered to this simple and very short verse. And get up to it. Yeah. So faith shows the reality of what hope for. So we have faith, hope, and it is the evidence of things we cannot see. There's three parts in that. Get back down to where I was. Okay, good to go. So the tangibility of those hopes is found in our faith. And the assurances or convictions that these things are in fact real. So our hope, or our faith, so our hopes are founded in faith. So, as I said, we'll talk about hope in a minute, but let's stay on faith just for a moment. Let's talk about this first one. So, as I told you, I went to Google, and if you Google the definition of faith, it will tell you a complete confidence in something. How vague. That's like saying, what is a forest? Well, there's trees. Yeah, and so it's very vague. So kind of disappointed with Google there. I turned to another resource that I've actually only recently kind of, because honestly I'm afraid of it, but I turned to ChatGPT and I asked ChatGPT, what is faith? And ChatGPT actually gave me this long dissertation almost of what faith is. It talked about a lot of things. The only thing useful I found about it was something I hadn't considered. English is not a 2,000-year-old language. So all these words that we read are not native, or were not written in English. They had to be translated. So I said, okay, that's fine. And I found that the word faith is a made-up, abstract English word. It's because it was used, they needed a word to describe something else. So what was that word that we had to use? I did a little math, and I did 2023 minus, the English language has been around for about 1,200 years, at least an English language that we would at least somewhat understand. And so, I did a little math, I carried the 2 and everything. I did not come up to the time of Christ, which is kind of where faith becomes a major factor in our beliefs here, because before that it was law. After this, it became faith. And so faith was a word to describe a Hebrew word, and I'm going to mess this up. I just want to go ahead and say this, so if any Hebrew experts in the audience, the word is E-M-U-N-A-H, imuna. I believe that is the word, or that is how you would say it. If not, that's how we say it around here in Milton, Florida. So, and which translated means a steadfast belief in something. Goes back to Google. So I was like, okay, maybe Google wasn't that far off. And so, thanks to ChatGPT and a long reading, that was all I got out of it, is where the word faith came from. Then we really can't. So we made up a word to describe another one that we didn't really probably quite understand what the meaning behind it was. Old Hebrews would know that means, it's just a steadfast belief in something. And they probably didn't use the word in a religious sense all the time. Whereas faith is almost exclusively religious for people today in the English-speaking world. So we got faith, and we've talked about kind of what faith isn't. So we've rooted faith in this hope, and hope in faith. So we have a faith is something that we hope for. Well, what is hope? And hope was a little easier to tackle. A lot of people use hope in just our normal lives day to day. And so I decided, let's talk about hope. What do we mean when we hope? Because one of the first things I thought of was one of my favorite songs that I ever sang in church was "The Greatest Command." Had the 4 parts, everybody sings, and it starts off with the. You don't know that one, okay. Paula's shaking her head. Well, does anybody know 1 Corinthians 13:7? Love bears all things. Mm-hmm. What? Yeah, the love chapter. Exactly. Okay. I thought you said wrong chapter for a minute. I was about to say, what? Oh, man. Okay. Well, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. 3 things in that, pretty simple to explain. How does love hope? Like, that's something, now we're talking like, okay, now I don't get it. Now I got to back this up. And what's crazy is I've been singing this song for years, and I never thought about it. And, that particular verse in that song is, that's the part the bass sings. It's, that's the line that keeps the whole song going. And I've said those lines, like, no kidding, probably 1,000 times in my life. Never thought to think, what is love hopes all things? And that's because we tend to use the word hope. I've noticed, I thought, what is hope? I was racking I didn't go to Google for this one. This was straight out of the noggin here. And I said, what is hope? Hope. I was going through and I was thinking, hope, okay. How would we use hope? Well, I hope we have a sunny day on Sunday. Yeah. I hope the car doesn't break down on this trip. Something I like to say, I hope Milton wins this Friday. And it's just little things. And I started saying hope, a lot of things. And I was like, that's not what hope is. That's back to what I was originally saying, in that's more wishful thinking. And you could really take the word hope in those little short examples I gave you, and you could swap out the word hope for wish that. I wish that the weather would be good on Sunday. And that's exactly the way that most people these days use the word hope. At least that's the way I perceive it, because I see it a lot. People talk about it. In the military, we'll talk about things, we're going on. Well, I hope they let us off here pretty soon. No, you wish they let you off here pretty soon. Keep dreaming. You know, those of you that been in know that one. So hope, if we've been using the word hope wrong, at least in the biblical sense, you know, there's a place for that in our daily lives. But if we've been using the word hope wrong, then what do we mean by all this? And as Christians, the thing that makes our hope different, you know, again, I had to use the gray matter up here. That's an official doctor term, by the way, Billy. Gray matter. So the thing as Christian that makes our hope different is God, right? That is what makes our hope different. So when we talk about that faith is what we've hoped for, you know, that now we can start actually diving into that first half of that verse. For what hope, the correlation between hope and faith. So hope is assurance in knowing God, in knowing that God, and it's not just a dream, or it's not just a wish. You know, I hope this and I hope that, and those are all wishes and they're dreams. But our hope as Christians is, again, founded in something much, much bigger, much deeper. The what? Well, yes, in God. Mm-hmm. So, I had written down, I had show and tell. My Bible here that I've had since, so I'll tell you. My parents gave me this Bible on my birthday in 1998 when I turned 13. And I've been using it. It's an NKJV. Pretty nice. Leather case. You know, I never skimp. I always get leather. But I've also kept in it this little notepad for pretty early on. And I noticed it was on the second page I wrote down. And I cannot remember. I remember the thing I have written above it. I remember writing it down. A very close friend of the family, Miss Joey Chandler, she once told me one of the first things I ever wrote down because I had my new Bible. She told me, this book will keep you from sin, and sin will keep you from this book. And that's very true. And like I said, I remember who told me that, where I was, when I wrote it down. But the next thing I have written down, I have no idea who told me it. I had no idea where I was, how old I was. Well, I guess it was about the time, about 13, but I wrote it down. And 13-year-old me, we're going to have a talk about your handwriting. But it says, upon God's faithfulness rest our whole hope for future blessedness, that only that we have complete assurance that he is faithful, may we live in peace and hope for life to come. And I know some of y'all's brains are probably like, now we're talking about, being saved and everything. And that's exactly what we're talking about. Found some good stuff in there. I mean, I open it, but you never really dig in the pockets very often. You just stuff stuff in pockets, and I actually found some good stuff. The Bible's well used, but the stuff underneath it is not. Sorry. Let's see. So, based on what I just read to you, I also wrote it down up here, but I had to read it from that. I just felt better to read it from that. So, based on what we just, upon God's faithfulness rest our whole hope of future blessedness. So, our hope in faith in God is what kind of gives us I guess how do I say this? I'm at a loss for words, which is weird for me. So it's our hope in God that kind of gives us a hope for the future and what things may come. It is peace. It's peace while we're here on this earth. And confidence. It is confidence. Actually, did you get my notes? No, you don't. I'm kind of enjoying this. This is all right. So now we're going to bring up, so we kind of talked a little bit about faith, a little bit about hope. So now let's talk about the second half of that verse. And now we're going to talk about assurances of the things not seen. So the final point of that verse is, depending on your version, it either says that the evidence or the assurance or the confidence of, or the conviction of things not seen. So whatever version you're using, one of those three words is probably used. Online Bibles are awesome. There's literally hundreds of different translations, and almost all, I'm going to say almost all of them. I skimmed through about 10 of them, and they all use one of those three words. It either says evidence, assurance, or conviction of things not seen. So it's talking about a personal conviction by the Christian believer, by us. And that God has promised something that he is going to bring to pass. So when we believe that when God has told us something, or he has promised us something, or that he has said that he's going to do something, that he will in fact do it. And open your Bibles, just turn anywhere. Like, there's all sorts of proof of that. So we believe and we believe and we believe. Oh, you know for sure there's nothing you can do to tell us different. And you know, why does it say that? I'm sorry. My notes are, I did not get to go over my final look over before tonight. So, and you just know that with everything that you are and that everything that you believe, that these things will come true. And people may ask, like, well, how do you know? How do you know that? And it's like, well, I have faith. And they're like, oh, that's faith. Faith is just, that's just a bunch of, faith, whatever. It's like, no, that's not what that is at all. We do not believe that it's just a bunch of, because our faith in God is confident expectation. Not only do we believe that, we have faith that God is going to do what he says he's going to do, or that, we believe what he has told us, but we expect him to do that. As Christians, we fully expect God to come through with our word, or with his word. And that's pretty big for us to think that, considering that we do not hold up our end of the bargain as a rule. We all sin. We all do the things that we know we're not supposed to, but we do it anyway. So for us to expect that from God, and he really, that's part of the grace of God too, that he doesn't expect us in return to give equal back. He doesn't expect it. He wants that, but he does not expect that from us. And it's because of that is why we can, in fact, be saved. So as Christians, we do not all expect, or as Christians, do we not all expect God to fulfill his promises? And is he not fulfilling them to us? And the answer is yes, he does. He always has been and always will be. His faith is unchanging and does not falter. So therefore, there is an understanding that he will bring the things he promised to pass. And the very evidence of our conviction in that is all the evidence that God needs. Our conviction in our faith in him is all that he requires in return. That's a pretty low bar to hit, honestly, if you think about it. So, even though we expect so much from him, he expects so little from us in return. And if you read the red lettering in your Bible, for those of you with red letter Bibles, you all at least know what I'm talking about. If you read what is said, Jesus kind of confirms that. He doesn't ask a lot of us. That's not what it's about. One of the stories on faith is, I call it the Battle of Mount Carmel, because when I was a kid, that's just kind of how I saw it as. But Elijah versus the priest of Baal. And here is, I mean, this is probably one of my top 3 favorite stories. Elijah gets up there and he's like, all right, I got a God, you got a God. Let's see whose God is better. And he's just, I mean, almost to the point, it's almost just bad showmanship. But he says, you know what, we're going to set up 2 altars. You sacrifice your calf, I'll sacrifice mine. Catch is, you can't start the fire, your God has to. And they're like, all right, we got you. So they get over there, and Elijah's first step is to go find a tree and sit up underneath it and just stay in the shade while all these other priests are just, I can imagine the scene, honestly. I have a hard time kind of with the way people kind of read out of the stories out of the Bible anyway. It's always just so, and then they said to the multitudes, will you? And I'm just like, that is not how it was said, I promise. So, I can just see just Elijah over there kicked back and just probably wishing they would be quieter in their chanting so he could take a nap. But yet they keep working and they keep working. They're praying to the Baal. They're praying to Baal. Please, please, Baal, come light our fire. And so after a while, I guess he got bored, and I would probably do the same thing. He starts taunting them like, maybe your God's sleeping. Say it a little louder. Maybe he had to go to the bathroom. Who knows? I don't know. So he's just going on and he's trolling them. And so he's finally had enough of it. And he's just, and basically he just goes up, he just starts to pray. Fire. He's just like, hey. And it just happens. His faith was just unshakable in that. And I've always loved that story anyway. And it's, I really wanted to try to tie it into my lesson, but I really couldn't. So I just kind of threw it in there just because I can, because I have the microphone. So when we talk about hope, so we talk about hope for things not seen is in God and in Jesus Christ. Hello? So, has anybody, so I use this in one of my lessons. There's one of my lessons that, in teaching at the schoolhouse down in Pensacola that I say, and I pull up this slide, and this slide, it's a circle, but there is more than 360 degrees on the circle. And so in order to try to explain this to my students, I say this phrase: are you going to believe what you see, or are you going to believe what I tell you? Because if you try to make any sense of what you see, you're never going to get it. So listen to what I'm telling you, because we're not dealing with the circle. It's just a visual representation. And so, and I thought about that for a minute, and I was just like, sometimes you probably need to actually believe what you're told and not what you see. Anybody look around this world? It's a depressing place. This world is not an easy place to be. We have majestic mountains and vast oceans, and we have a lot of beauty in this world. How many people take for granted all this stuff that, we don't see? How many people here like the pollen season? No? Everybody just says Benadryl and more car washes. Y'all like it? Okay. Well, it is springtime, so that is a benefit. Does anybody stop to think, like, really the kind of the magic that's happening? Plants, and how we keep plants going on in this world? That's what that is. But yet we sit there and say, but I get sneezy, my head gets stopped up, and I got to wash my car every 3 days now. You can't keep anything clean, track it in the house, and that's what we see. And that's the way we look at a lot of things in this world. We forget just how majestic this world really is. And that's okay. It happens to everybody. It happens to me. Everybody remember the first time they saw a mountain? Yeah, and just how impressive that was. And now you can still kind of get that feeling if you hadn't seen the mountains in a few years, and you go back, it's like, oh, I love this. But I guarantee you, if you live in the... Do what? Mm-hmm. That's the Smoky Mountains, too. Or the Appalachians. Then you got, the even more impressive, the Rockies. Try climbing up those things. That'll get you. I've done that a few times. I'm glad I did it when I was a little bit younger, because I would have a hard time even today, because that was, Anyway, good memories and bad all at the same time. So we have all this stuff around the world, and the world tells you, the world tries to make everything out to be hard. It really does. Things that just don't need to be hard, and just they for some reason are. And that's, to me, that's kind of a reason why we have, depression and anxiety and things like that. People today, it's hard to live in this world. Just the littlest stresses. We've gotten to the point where we are just up here all the time on stress, that you add just a little bit more, and it becomes a problem. And it's because this, like I said, the world is a mean place. It is very evil, you're right. Because it wants to tell you how to live, where to live, what to drive, where to work, how to work. It'll tell you, how you're supposed to dress, how you're supposed to look, what this looks like. And yes, if you have all the money in the world, yes, that's probably an easy thing to do. But here in reality, and for God-fearing folk, that's not how we are told to live. So, and God doesn't ask us for that either. What he has asked from us is very simple. And honestly, Jesus was sent down to this earth to in part to kind of help explain some of this to us. We have 4.5 books dedicated to Jesus' ministry. Maybe like 4 1/3, 4 1/4. I included like that first part of Acts in that. And he comes down and he starts his ministry. He gets his disciples, and they're all going all over the place. And Jesus has said 100 different ways the same thing, because they don't ask much. He describes, one way here and one way there, and I'll tell you this parable. But in the end, he is teaching on how to live an eternal life. That's it. He says this, and basically, if you really think about it, if you really stop and think and read a lot of these parables and the stories that he tells and the stories that are written down in the Bible, he's just explaining to somebody else, about faith and about love and about why he's here. And there's some of these stories, he'll sit there and tell the disciples 2 or 3 parables meaning the same thing, and then they're still like, I don't get it. It's like, you think, Jesus was like, oh, y'all are so dense. Like, how do you not get this? But that's because the world, they were looking at it at the view of the world. And that's not what we're asked to do. We don't look at the world that much. So, I have a little anecdote here. And I wanted to my sister knows that I was born in the wrong decade, because I like a lot of old movies. I like a lot of old music. I really like stuff from the early 2000s. I'm kidding. I know y'all are like, that's old. No. No. In fact, but what I like to do is when I'm going through this, there's so many, since, of course, all the big ones, Clark Gable, and all the big names from that era. But it's the smaller ones that, I didn't grow up with, so I don't really know them. So a lot of times I like to look and see, how life has been to them. What did they do in their life? They were kind of an up-and-coming star here, or they were kind of a downhill star, this movie. And I like to kind of see what happened with them. And so the last time I actually did this was just the other day. I actually added this in last night. And there was a song on my way home I was listening to. I'm going to see who can guess this one. I'm going to give you the year and who sang it, and y'all will probably know instantly who it was. So I was bebopping around in the car, and I was listening to a song from 1963, song by Little Peggy March. It was called I Will Follow Him. She's basically a one-hit wonder. Not quite, but it's pretty close to one-hit wonder. She had a few other chart-topping hits. And, most people know that, she still holds the record, actually, for youngest female artist to ever have a number one. Taylor Swift came close, but she didn't beat little Peggy March. And so I was wondering, I was like, well, what happened? Because she was 15 years old when that song became number one, and you don't really hear much about her since 1963. So I had to go and look and see what she's done. It's pretty standard life. She still kind of tours and does some things. She doesn't quite have the fame she used to, but she's 75 now. And I wonder, I as I look at some of these people, a lot of them that are still alive, especially when you talk about some of these older movies and older musicians that were in their 30s and 40s and the 50s and 60s, of course they're not here with us today. But as you look at kind of toward the end of their life, I mean, this is what we get. This is the body we get. And if you think about it, you kind of peak when you're in your early 20s, and from then on, we kind of start going downhill until, Okay. I was about to make that comment. It was the women that were just, I'll see myself out. Good night, y'all. I don't mean it in that aspect. I don't mean. I'm speaking of all people. That as we get older, that we start. We kind of start that. Yes, there is. Don't take my dreams from me. Okay. She says no golden years. All right. So as as we get older and our health starts to fade, our joints start not working, our eyes don't read in the dark as well as they used to when you're sitting in a booth trying to read a menu. All right, so you get to this point in your life, and we start that downhill slide until we take our last breath, and I know that's depressing. I know y'all are probably like, where are you going with this? Because if that was really the end, I think everybody would be depressed, because it's not the end, is it? We all know that is not the end. That's not where we're going to end up. And as Christians, we are told by the non-believers that we live, we die, and that's it. It's depressing. And I don't agree with that. Faith. I'm going to bring it back. I know what y'all are kind of, where y'all going? Where are you going with this? There we go. I'm bringing it back. So faith is our hope in God for the proof of things we cannot see. That's our verse tonight. So our hope is in so many things the world cannot supply. The world can give us things that we think we want. It can give us things that we think that we need. The world will give us all these things, and when we die, that's the end of it. But our faith and our hope is that death here on earth will only hasten us to the presence where there is no more pain and no more suffering, and that is heaven. That's what we know, that our faith, or that is our hope. Anyway, our Christian hope is in that. A little verse while I was going through, when Paul wrote to Titus, chapter 2, 11 through 14, for those of you that are following along, he says, "For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in the present age, waiting for our blessed hope, that appearing of the glory, of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ." That is our end game. That is where, I see why everybody likes to have water and stuff up here. Good. Stay. So, and God and Jesus tell us not to be of this world, but simply in it. And there are a lot of red letter texts. We talked about those red letter texts earlier. There's a lot of red letter text in that both allude and outright say not to get attached to this world. Do not put your faith and your hope in this world and things of this world. You know, and we run into that, you know, sometimes as Christians we'll say that. I actually was talking with Paul a little while back, a couple of weeks ago, when I was telling her about kind of what I wanted to do and everything, and I was kind of saying a few things about it, and she completely disagreed. You know, I was saying, when we pray, who all in here has a story that just immense prayer? We know that it was immense prayer, and as Billy has been telling us the last couple of weeks, God's own hand, that somebody in a situation came out of it that they probably shouldn't have. I think everybody's got a story like that. But for every story I could ask that was true, can you also tell me a story that it wasn't? Mm-hmm. Because God never promised us that. He never said that, all you have to do is just simply, have faith. And a lot of people are like, faith of a mustard seed. And they're just like, oh, well, I had so much faith, and I believed, and we prayed, and yet, Uncle Ricky, he just didn't make it. Like, that's true. But because, as I said, God did not promise us these things, because he also has a plan for everything and everyone. So just because you have faith in it, and so we feel sometimes like we're being punished, or that we're not being rewarded for our faith. Our reward was supposed to be, they're going to make it through. But so what if they do? You get a couple more years with them, or maybe you yourself, or we don't know what tomorrow brings. So we can't be too caught up in things that we hope for on this earth. I think. There's very much a reason for everything. But we can't lose our faith simply because, we see that, like, oh, well, we lost. That's not what you did. You did not lose. And so, like I said, I got to give credit to Paula for kind of setting my brain straight on that one. Because we have faith that God will provide us with something he never promised us in that particular example. So he wants to bless us, though. He wants us to be happy here in life. But he never intended us or for us to fix our hope on anything in this life. And because when we do, we leave ourselves wide open for our own disappointment. And it's self-inflicted disappointment. So whenever we talk about having to fix our faith in something, we have to fix our faith in God and understand that he has the plan, that he is the one that has kind of the ultimate decision here. So, in conclusion, I'm going to close. I just didn't really know how to end this, so what I was going to do is just simply reread after this little lesson here. I was just going to reread our verse, and it's faith shows the reality of what we hope for, and it is the evidence of things we cannot see. The righteous shall live by faith. So thank you all for coming this evening. Brother Billy, would you like to wrap us up here? And yes, sir.
I know it's probably not customary, but let's give him a big hand. Thank you, Matthew. We appreciate you. Faith. You picked a very difficult subject. Because if you don't know what it is, then you don't know what it is. For by grace are we saved, and the avenue is faith. And that is not even of itself. It's a gift from God. Thank you, Matthew, for reminding us of what faith is. And thank you all for coming out tonight. Got a nice crowd. And those of you watching by social media, we hope you enjoyed this time. Next week, we're going to start probably about a 2-lesson series about fools. Now, you just got to come and find out what that's all about fools. It'll take about 2 Wednesday nights to cover the story, but I just wanted to whet your appetite just a little bit for what's coming up. And again, thank you again, Matthew. I'm going to ask Brother Gary, you close in prayer for us, please, sir. Amen. Thank you all, and again, thanks for